at State House in Nairobi, and seems he's leaving nothing to chance, still engaging his peers across the continent. One last word that may perhaps get that much needed vote for his former political rival, and now become, who has now morphed into his political friend, more or less, since offering the political insurance in the aftermath of the Gen Z demonstrations that had dotted the president's administration in June 2024, culminating with the breach of parliament in 2024, in opposition to what they termed as punitive tax proposals that were then contained in the finance bill, which was ever since then withdrawn. And you can see President Tinubu of Nigeria there, still in a very sharing light moment as well with his peers from the continent, and the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa, as well as the other leaders who will be getting hold of now at the moment. Back to the studio with Gordon, Ahmed, and Professor Maxwell. Gentlemen, a lot has happened, and even before the elections, it seems that the African continent is speaking from a position of not letting its relevance fade away. You have seen, Gordon, still on you, before we went on break, we had discussed this. The question of stability of the world depending on the stability and progress of Africa. That is the Prime Minister Mayakli. I mean, how important is it for Africa to come of age and be counted on the table of international politics and diplomacy?
Well, up to now, the conversation that has been going on is quite interesting at the plenary, because all is pointing at Africa's importance in the world, in the global affairs. And every speaker is pointing to Africa, telling Africa one thing: you either stand out or you get diminished. You realize that in Mia Mottley's speech, she's emphasizing particularly on matters of climate change, on matters of financial architecture within the global system that has disadvantaged Africa in one way or another. At this level, Africa and all the people gathered in Ethiopia have only one thing to take home. We either get it right this time round, or we never get it right. And why must they get it right this time round? Because when we talk of critical minerals, today we have the Critical Minerals Club formed by the big boys, the EUs, the Americans. They will determine what the process of extraction, the prices at the market, whereas they are not the primary owners of these critical minerals. Mm-hmm. So at this time, Africa has reawakened from its slumber. And it is very important to note that at the end of this session, which of course I was a light moment sharing outside here, I was telling colleagues here that, look, there's a possibility of even a consensus before we go to the
Okay.
Yeah, mm-hmm. There's a possibility of consensus. In that closed-door meeting, Africa must come out in more united position than ever.
Okay, Ahmed, there is also a general observation here made by our viewers. We had seen a changeover from the president of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, Mohamed Ould Sheikh Al Ghazouani, who has handed over to Joao Lourenço of the Republic of Angola. The difference between, just to draw the attention for our viewers, between the African Union Commission and the African Union, I mean, here for an understanding for our viewers as well, to understand the difference.
The novelist, the African-American novelist Zora Neale Hurston said that if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and you'll enjoy it. And I think that the theme of the African Union today is not far apart from that, because what it says, as the Prime Minister of Barbados, we all admire, absolutely put it on the plate. That the issues that my learned friends are very basic things. I want to suggest a much more maybe nuanced way of looking at how our economics and our politics will work, by saying that we should not let the African Union be a talking club. We should not let it be a talking club like, say, for example, the Arab League, because everybody calls the Arab League a talking club. But I think it's much more than that. I think it's just propaganda. It would be propaganda to say that the African Union is also a talking club. It's not. It is the zeitgeist, the very avenue of the spirit of our Pan-Africanist ambitions, in which...
Okay, Ahmed, let me just pause you. We'll expound more on the differences. Allow me to get hold of Seth Olale, who is live for us from the headquarters of the African Union. And Seth is there telling us more about the live pictures you are seeing on your screens.
Where they will be served with refreshments before now going back to the second phase of this particular summit. And just a recap to what happened in the morning session, we saw the introductory remarks of this particular summit by the likes of the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Mohammed. We also had pronouncements from the United Nations Secretary General. We also had some remarks from the representatives from the Palestine state. Very, very, very compelling, attributes also from the African Union Commission, the outgoing AUC chairperson Musa Faki, urging the continent to unite in fighting illiteracy and poverty. Musa Faki there also making a very, very passionate appeal towards unity and peace and stability, and especially in warring regions where we've seen security deteriorating through conflicts that have actually escalated, the likes of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan. When you go up to the Central Africa region, likes of Chad and Mali, cross over to the ECOWAS, where there was a spate of coup d'etat. So Musa Faki there also urging the African states to embrace technology as a way of also boosting food security in the continent, which he attributes to really having been the key cause of the rising levels of poverty in the continent. And so that was part one agenda of the program. You saw there the adoption of the agenda, the official launch of the African Union theme of the year 2025, and right now that particular morning event culminated in a family. They call it the presidential family photo session. So it's not just an ordinary group photo session. It is the presidential family session. What happens from here? Like I mentioned before, from here they've taken a quick break, 15, 20 minutes break. They're gonna take some refreshments before heading back to the closed session. This particular session will have two main agenda. First and foremost, the adoption of the agenda and organization of work of the African Union. This will see the tabling of the adoption of the agenda, as well as the highlighting of the organization of work. After this particular session, that's going to take about 1 hour, we're going to go to the most crucial, undoubtedly, session of the afternoon. And this will be the elections and appointments of members of the African Union organs. And this will see the presentation of vision statements and proposed priorities for candidates for the election of the chairperson of the African Union Commission. It is at this time where we will see, the program will witness the member states in this particular plenary. The member states of this particular summit will have an opportunity to hear from the candidates vying for the position of the chairperson of the Africa Union Commission, Raila Amolo Odinga from Kenya, Richard Yamandrato from Madagascar, and Djibouti's Mohamed Yusuf Ali. They will have a brief presentation of their vision statements and proposed priorities, that just like they did during the Mjadala Africa that was held at this particular venue end of last year. So after that particular presentation of their agenda and of their priorities, they're going to go into an election period, and this will be the second phase of the elections and appointment of members of the AUC organ. Remember that we have 6 commissioners who were already elected by the Interministerial Executive Council of the Africa Union. So what is pending are 2 positions, that of the chairperson of the Africa Union Commission and the deputy chairperson of the Africa Union Commission. What follows next is the election of the chairperson and that of the deputy. After this particular exercise, the election and appointment of the deputy chairperson of the AU Commission and the chair, then the results will be officially announced to all the sitting heads of states and of government here. After
All right, Seth Olale there live for us from the Ethiopian capital, Addis, where he is keeping an eye on the flock of personnel present there on your screens at the headquarters of the African Union, where they have just walked out of the plenary session for lunch before the closed door session begins, and we'll be getting hold of Stephen Leto and Olive Barros as well, who are outside the headquarters, to give us also an assessment of what so far is transpiring there and how crucial the next stage will be. Ahmed, I was still on you. Yes. Given the understanding the line between, of course, the AU, that is where now will be chaired for the next 1 year by Joao Lourenco, yes, and the AUC that will be chaired by whoever becomes the chairperson.
And then the commission,
yes,
which is does the daily secretariat work of the definition or the orders of the assembly. You know, there's the assembly of which is the president, and then there's the day-to-day running of the thing, which is done by the African the commission. And this is done precisely because they want the states and the presidents to have final say. You know, there's the Peace and Security Council, yeah, which does the necessary military political issues that surround the African Union. And one of the things that is pushing and pulling at the African Union is this idea of regionalism versus unity. And remember, since 1960, there was the Casablanca Group, in which people like Julius Nyerere wanted regional cooperation first before they went into the Union. And then there was the Monrovia Group, which the Casablanca Group, which wanted the Union, and the Monrovia Group, which wanted the regional issue. So I think that the same tensions are inherent in the African Union today. Of course, now, my opinion, that the regional issue is gaining more strength, because once you come in and as a region and you negotiate with the other regions, then it is easier. I'll give you an example, a concrete example. In West Africa, the ECOWAS has now become a chicken that doesn't lay any eggs, because the 3 leaders of the Sahel who are now excluded from coming here, yeah, who have the overwhelming support of the African 1.5 billion people, completely support, for an example, in Burkina Faso. The coup. One of the things that the African Union is out of step with is that most of the presidents who are in that place are not elected in this AU. And you can name it, from Togo, which supports us, Equatorial Guinea, name each country, and you would see that they do not have democratic systems. Now, there's no democratic system in the Sahel. But there is no use to give a democratic system your vote, and then it becomes a tart in the international community. You know what a tart is, of course. So I can't use the other name. All right. So I put it to you that tension is still inherent in there.
It's profile engage you, and Gordon, crossing over to Jimmy. who is standing by at the Nairobi Central Business District for a watch party along the Aga Khan Walk. Good afternoon, Jamie, and thanks for joining us here on the broadcast. What can you tell us?
A very good afternoon to you too, Ayub, and your panel. And of course, it's quite an exciting afternoon here in the capital. Of what we are seeing is a group of young people who have been following the proceedings. And of course, even as they wait for that critical moment when the election will be carried out, will be conducted later on in the afternoon. So what has been going on is a lot of entertainment, from acrobats to skaters to fantastic music that has been playing. And I'm sure even right now you can hear a part of that still going on in the background. So what happened is, earlier on in the morning, we started off at the Aga Khan Walk. That is where the procession started. We've driven all the way through Parliament Road, and currently we are at the intersection between Parliament Road and Cardinal Otunga Road, and that's where we have pitched tent now before heading back. Of course, this watch party was meant to happen at the sunken car park right at the heart of the CBD here in Nairobi. But of course, today being a Saturday, what is currently going on there is we have some form of a market. Now, I want to be able to engage with the people behind this idea and this watch party. And Ronald has been behind this watch party, and I just want to know, what is the idea behind it? Why did they decide to do it? So, Ronald, thanks so much for making time to speak to Citizen TV. One of the things that I want you to tell us is the idea behind this watch party and who's footing the bill for this.
I don't think it's a matter of a bill per se footing it. Yeah. So as the youth of Kenya, we decided to come together, people who perform, dancers, acrobats, decided to come together. Instead of watching this from the house, we decided to come to Nairobi CBD so that we can watch it together as we celebrate a Kenyan champion going for the AUC seat.
And of course, there are a lot of implications in terms of what then this portends for the country's political scene. And of course, we've seen over the last couple of months, a lot of Kenyan youth are becoming politically active, and we're seeing them voicing their concerns in terms of the direction that the country should be heading. And of course, the AUC position being a critical one in terms of just fostering that Pan-Africanism. And I just want to know, what are your expectations as you?
But the young people have had a bit of issues with what is going on in the country. But if there's something that can bring us together, and this is one thing that can bring us together as a country, then we take the opportunity to be able to celebrate a big Kenyan brand, or going for a big continental seat as well. So that is one thing that it brings us together. We are happy to do that. We can go back to looking at what is wrong in the country later on. But for today, we are coming together as a country for Raila Amolo Odinga.
It be with athletes, whether it be with the rugby team or the Harambee Stars, that whenever there's something bigger than the country, we get to that the country has always wished for. And of course, the AUC position being a critical one. We know that now Kenyans are putting away their political sides and their political views of what's going on in the country to just say Raila Odinga is a Kenyan, and we all are rallying behind him. I just want to engage with a gentleman here. He's very famous from Bunge la Mwananchi, and I just want to know what the expectation is. Kindly sir, tell us your good name na utuambie matarajio yako ni yapi.
Kwa majina naitwa Robert Kiberenge. Na I'm a diehard Raila supporter. For very many years, I voted for him in every election, and I believe in Raila. And I'm very much delighted and excited today that the man whom I have believed in for very many years is going to become the AU chair for Africa. And I'm very much happy about that. And let Kenyans support him. Raila is one of our own. Africa must tap in Raila's brains, in Raila's talent, in Raila's academia and experience. Africa must tap in him, because this man is very experienced. We have never given him a chance to be a president in Kenya, but I believe this man deserves to be the AUC chair.
All right, Bwana Kiberenge, what do you see that Raila is going to likely bring to the Africa Union, and also at a time when we continue to see a lot of countries open? What is the vision that you believe Raila brings to the AUC?
Raila brings enormous experience. Raila has reached experience, particularly in infrastructure. A mechanical engineer from Magdeburg University, Germany. And when he was the AU special envoy for infrastructure development, he came up with a Marshall Plan to develop infrastructure in Africa. And that Marshall Plan, he gave it a vision of 2060. So
there is at the Aga Khan Walk in Nairobi Central Business District, where the watch party is at the moment ongoing. Exuberance there you see from members of the public. And back in studio, Gordon and Prof literally will be talking about what the Prime Minister Maya Motley has said and the weight of her speech there at the African Union headquarters. She talked about the new world, middlemen, new colonialism, stability of the world tied to Africa, the visas, apartheid, South Africa, and the context she had provided. Over to the headquarters of the African Union, Addis, and where my colleagues are standing by, the trio of Olive Barrows, Stephen Letoa, and Seth Olale, and to get more pictures from there. What more can you tell us regarding the session, which is now on a break, and later on, of course, proceeding with the closed-door session?
We need to unite as a community, as the African community, both those living here and those who are living without. Then the second aspect, which was key to me, was the reparations that has been lip service by all these powers that be, both in Europe and in the Americas, that no one has come forward to pay credence to the injustices that were perpetrated on the African continent and on the African people. And therefore, they are saying that this time we must come out full hog to claim for what is rightfully ours. It is an absurdity that Africa that has 40% of minerals turns out to be the poorest in the entire world. So what a travesty that we suffer as the African people.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa Jared Okello Nyando. Let's cross over. Governor, you know, it's really is also an issue about governance. What do you make of where the Africa agenda needs to focus in the next 4 years?
I think, thank you very much. We are very happy to be here to support our candidate Raila Odinga. And what we have witnessed today is a rekindle of the Pan-Africanism that was started by the founding fathers of Kwame Nkrumah. So we're just hoping that one of the takeaways from what I have listened today is that as Africa, we should be able to harness our resources and stop relying so much on external funding or external support. We have enough resources, we have enough minerals that as a country, if we are to use it, we should be, as a country to use it, it should be able to develop Africa as a continent. So we are here to support the candidature of our candidate, Raila, whom we strongly that with his experience, he should be able to provide the leadership that's going to change this continent of Africa.
Thank you so much. Let us cross over to Kisumu County, headed by Governor Anyang' Nyong'o Peter. Governor, you know, how can we implement, you know, some of the, you know, pressing issues that were discussed, issues to do with good governance, security, peace and harmony among African member states? How do we perfect some of the, you know, issues raised today?
Do you know, these are the issues that inspired the struggle for independence. So they're not new in Africa. They're as old as the struggle for independence. How can we implement them? You can see in Addis Ababa, if you have got good leadership, good policy, and commitment to change, things can happen very rapidly. So I think let us put our money where our mouth is, to change Africa for the better. Secondly, it is known that unity is strength. The whole purpose of creating the African Union was to maximize on our numbers and our resources and our size of the continent, so that the continent as a whole moves forward. Nobody is left behind. Now, of course, now you can see what's happening in the DRC. It really undermines the purpose of African unity, that our resources are being used by people who disorganize our societies, and we must come together to stop that. If we do not, then we shall only be speaking and not doing something to change our continent.
What was your key highlight in the morning session out of all those addresses made by the speakers?
I think my key highlight, the thing about the Palestinians, because it is key. It is key, it is urgent. It shows solidarity with struggling people. And you know, the Palestinians are very productive people. Given a chance in their own homeland, they will do a lot to the third world. So I think that disruption of Palestine is not only an injury to Palestinians, it is an injury to the whole of the third world, struggling to get out of the oppression by the imperialism and neo-imperialism in our two societies, Africa and the Middle East.
Thank you so much, Governor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o there, the governor of Kisumu, just part of the delegation, both from Kenya and also the African delegation, that has camped here in Addis Ababa. I'll allow you to leave, Governor. Thank you so much. And you know what? We had one, Stephen Leto, Kipruto, who was part and parcel of, the delegates. Leto, you almost thought you were ahead of state because you are sitting so close in the plenary, to the designated dignitaries. But Leto, the very passionate speeches this morning.
Absolutely. Speeches from the, Musa Faki, the outgoing AUC chair, giving a passionate, really, statement. But the most important one was that statement that was given by, what we will call the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, giving a very passionate speech, particularly on the issue of instability in Africa, particularly the issue of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sudan, saying that Africa is now the home of, millions and millions of, refugees within home. And so there is a lot of issues that came up in that speech. And the very, quote that I picked was that we should stop financing bloodshed. And that is exactly what the speeches out there were. But like you've said, I was really seated very, very, very close to the heads of state. What I can tell you, President William Ruto was a busy man throughout the first session of the 38th Summit of the Heads of State.
Restless, you want to say?
Not really restless, but literally moving in and out of the session with his team, trying to converse with presidents, from his left-hand side to the right-hand side to his front, just looking at his face. He looks bright and he looks, lobbying, doing a last-minute lobbying. And of course, we are hoping the last-minute lobbying could give Raila Odinga, an upper hand in the first round, second round, or
unfortunately, you ended up being carried away because you almost thought you were one of the heads of state. You were not, and unfortunately, you'll not be allowed in the second session.
Absolutely. The second session will be a closed session because what is essentially happening now is the heads of state are on a coffee break. That is what has been put. And coffee is their tea here, so they are on a coffee break for a couple of minutes, and then they will go back into the plenary, and it will be a closed door. And by the time they are done with that closed door session, we might be having some white smoke coming out in terms of progress in the order paper. Let's call it that for now. Progress in the order.
Because the election is the second item in the closed session.
Brought actually the election forward. Initially, it was the last item really, but according to the order paper that we've seen right now, the plenaries, that they've brought it to be the second item, which means before they go for a lunch break, we might be having some, close to some news.
We hope, and we're camping here just to make sure that we have that news. Let me just release you to have a cup of coffee as well, because Olive Barrows was also part and parcel of the plenary. It's the only opportunity they had, Leto and Olive, to attend that particular session. But you took some notes. You were very busy on your laptop. What did you gather out of this, Olive?
A lot was said. Internationally, if you look at the Palestinian situation, so we had the Palestinian president here. We saw Musa Faki speak on the subject as well. Have I taken over the interview? I thought you were interviewing me, Seth Olale. Well, a lot was said at the session today. We were with Stephen Leto, so we had our eye on the podium, as well as an eye on the presidents and their movements. As I'm sure you've heard from Stephen Leto, there was a lot of movement from the Kenya side, where we President William Ruto exit and enter the chamber several times as the speeches were being given. The same of Raila Odinga, the same of the Director General of the National Intelligence Service, Nuruddin has been part of the president's delegation. So it appears that there is a lot of lobbying going on. We also had members of parliament present to witness, as well as governors to witness the opening ceremony. And standing not too far away from me right now is the Kisumu governor. We had the Homa Bay governor, Gladys Wanga, as well in the precincts. And we had several members of parliament, Beatrice Alachi, Millie Odhiambo, and they were here to catch what was being said during the opening ceremony. As far as the speeches go, there was a wide breadth of speeches. Notable was Musa Faki's exit speech, as it were, and he listed the challenges that the African Union continues to face, and he says.
And there we go, the trio of Stephen Leto, Olive Barros, and Seth Olale giving us an assessment of what will happen next in the course of the closed-door session that will be held at the headquarters of the African Union, where they will be, also part of the agenda will be the voting for the chairperson and the deputy chairperson of the African Union Commission. Just a clarification between the differences between the African Union chairperson and the African Union Commission chairperson. The chairperson for the African Union will be President Joao Lourenço from the Republic of Angola, who had taken over the mantle from President Mohamed Ould Sheikh Al Ghazouani from the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, who will be the chairperson of the African Union as a whole entity, while the African Union Commission chairperson, who will be elected, either Raila Odinga, Richard Rangiamandrato, or Mahmoud Ali, will chair the commission and will have his secretariat that will be made up by 6 commissioners, 2 each from the southern, central, and western part of the continent. The east will provide the chairperson, and the north being the vice or the deputy chairperson. That's just the difference, drawing the lines for our audience to further understand what has just happened. Gentlemen, allow me to finish up with Crispin Otieno in Kisii County. Then we talk by extension about the profound remarks which were made by the Barbados Prime Motley, who is the chairperson of the Caribbean community, and a proud African moment for the speech she delivered. Crispin, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us again. This morning was a whole affair of cocktail feedback from the members of the public. Tell us more about where you are and their feeling as to the excitement around the elections in Addis.
Very good afternoon, Ayub, from our communication center. Indeed, it has been an interesting moment, and during the morning session, we could see what is happening across social joints, where we've witnessed an influx of members of the public going to the social joints just to follow the proceedings as they happen in Addis Ababa. And where I am right now is at a place called Diplos within Kisii town center. Members of the public have been following the proceedings at Mandela Hall, and I just want to just to interact with quite a number of them here, just to share with us what they make with regards to what is happening at Addis. You'll just start by introducing yourself, then tell us so far what's your expectation.
My name is Charles Mogaka. I'm the chairman for the Kenya Kisii County and acting regional. So I'm wishing Baba well, and whichever way it will go, Raila is still the supreme. Raila now has gone to international. Now I will be making decision from AU to Kenya. So we cannot underrate Raila at any given point. Whether he will win AU and become the African president, he will be the first African president. And if he loses, still we need him home back here. So Raila is still ours. Raila is Raila, and he remains to be Raila. So we wish him well from Kisii County and the entire Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You've also been following keenly what is happening at Addis. What do you have to make so far during this critical time?
Number one, I want to say that Africa is grieving because of poverty, because of poor economic policies, and because of insecurity across Africa. And I want to say this position is just a skunk for Kenyans. Why am I saying is because the incumbent chair from Chad has done his 8 years straight, and Chad is actually the 191 country which is poorest in the country. And so I want to say that as we continue to wait for the election, there is nothing completely that we are waiting for if Raila Odinga wins. If he wins, we're only waiting for maandamano across Africa, because that is exactly what he specialized in.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's get to hear what are some of your sentiments with regards to what is happening in Addis Ababa today.
Thank you. My name is Elijah Bogita, a citizen of this country. Raila Odinga, like any other leader, we wish him well. But personally, I wish him to fail so that he remembers that the blood of these who died on the streets, the hotspot of Kenya, where leaders like Kizza
Crispin Owino there, Otieno there, giving us the feedback from the public. We'll be getting back to him, as well as the watch party from Kondele, where Laura Otieno is keeping an eye on what's happening there, a place that had shown the president on equal measure, loathing and loving, the last time he was there in the company of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga when he visited the counties of Migori, Homa Bay, Kisumu and Siaya counties. Back here, Ahmed, hang on, Prof. The Barbados Prime Minister Maya Mottley pointed out her speech very solid. She said, confronting the challenges of the new world, Africa is required. The need for the end of middlemen and neocolonialism. The stability of the world, she pointed out, without Africa is not tenable. She talked about visas and how it's becoming a colonial aspect. She also, in that again, confounded the importance of African unity in ending apartheid in South Africa. Such a solid remark. Is it? And Africa seems to be speaking about a topic or a subject that in Europe, for example, today is seen as anathema. For example, the constant support for Israel, despite the bombardments of Gaza and America's support for it militarily and politically, the immunity at the UN. And Africa seems to be a voice of reason. Is it, regarding these speeches that were made?
Yes. Having watched very keenly the speech of the Prime Minister of Barbados, it tells you something, that she does understand the context. You know, she has contextualized the Africa's position in the global imperatives or the imperatives of the global institutional order. One of such imperatives, of course, you'll find power and economic differentials. Of course, latter day, you are finding much more of economic rationalism or strategic interests of different countries dictating global politics. And I think the Prime Minister there is actually making a special appeal. And this is an appeal that goes far beyond Pan-Africanism. She is actually appealing to Africans or African leadership to rise to the occasion and to be more cosmopolitan. You know, to recognize that other realities do exist, and these realities far exceed the African context, much as they shape the Africa's destiny, Africa's today's social and political status. Now, the Prime Minister of Barbados really is challenging Africans. How do therefore challenge both the economic and also the political power differentials? With what tools, whether ideological, political, diplomatic, do we confront the world? And I think Joao, the president of Joao Lorenzo Manuel also talked about it, things like collective solutions, talked about Africa's prosperity and so forth. In my view, I think to face contemporary challenges, you know, as I said earlier, we need new norms, new rules, new institutions. But above all, we need somebody who will go far beyond Africa's Pan-Africanism. We need a global cosmopolitan. One who understands that in the context of global and contemporary challenges, such as terrorism, climate change, ethnic conflict or regional conflict, you need to bring the world to help us solve some of these challenges. Because, for example, the problem of migration, whether into Europe, into Americas, cannot be solved by a rabid, immigration policy, by arresting people, putting them on the plane and getting them back to their own countries. That cannot solve the global problem. The global problem can only be solved collectively. And
but Prof, can we then have a voice from Africa in this sense? Because when you talk about migration in the context of, for example, net migration birthing far-right politicians, Marine Le Pen in France, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Matteo Salvini in Italy, and then now there's the talk of the Brexit party, which is midwifed by Nigel Farage. Wasn't it the blatant failure by the West through NATO, who bombarded Gaddafi and Libya, thereby creating an avenue for migration over the Mediterranean into Europe? Can they also look back at their hawkish foreign policy? And who is the African leader? And can Africa then stand up and point these issues to the Europeans, that your hawkish foreign policy is why we have these disruptions in the movement of people, and especially into Europe? Same case for, the case of Syria and Iraq, because of foreign policies, why we have this flock of people into Europe and birthing all these concerns around the far-right politics and politicians.
That is why at the very beginning, in differentiating between the AUC Commission and the African Union, apart from the political leadership, at the technocratic level, where we are going to have the chairman of the African Union Commission, the foremost technocrat who's going to be elected today has to have a particular African endogenous vision. And that's why I said we need to go beyond soft diplomatic politics. Okay. We need a top technocrat at the AUC Commission who is going to write resistance in international law, to write resistance into international and global politics. That needs somebody who's not subservient to any state, to any country, to any diplomatic endeavors. That's why I said at the very beginning, Kenya stands tall. The narrative or the discourse was first created by President William Ruto himself, who went to France. He has gone before the World Bank and IMF and challenged them at their own doorsteps. Okay. We need a politician or a strong African leader who is not politically tethered, who is also not subservient or has got or serving certain state interests. We need a politician who's going to serve an African interest in the context of America's white supremacists and exceptionalism, or Trump's nationalism, or European retreat and insularity. Okay. That person has got to be strong and has to have a vision, a cosmopolitan vision that stands particularly for Africa and Africans.
Yes, Ahmed.
Until the idea that one race is superior to another is toppled, totally abandoned, there will be war. That's a song from the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley. The speech itself was given by the Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. And it was given to a global stage in which the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley turned into one of the great music lyrics of the modern period. And I think that the Prime Minister of Barbados, whom I'm a great fan of, brings to the table issues that Africans themselves should be bringing to the table. Because of the particular experience of the African diaspora, in which the issues of racial slavery, plantation economies, and the rise of the independence movements across the Third World, in which Professor, my senior teacher, Professor Nyang just mentioned, is this idea that even our president has said something about, that the world economic, political, social, and cultural system is structured in a way by those who had won the First and the Second World War, the people who had established colonialism, who are a global minority. We're a global minority, and the United States and in Europe. The rise of China has challenged that, and the rise of Japan. But in Africa today, the crucial problem of poverty and helplessness can only be cured by a new, radical and militant political economy. We have experienced it here in Kenya by our young Gen Zs. These are people who are the children of Kibaki. Remember, Kibaki is the one who brought this extension of schools. The economy was booming. Their identity is about freedom and work, that generation. And I think that it's very important for us to understand the political economy of Africa so that we can find strength in the unity of the African Union, so that we can internalize our own economy, internalize our own culture, internalize our own political systems, and in that way free ourselves from this dependency. The great Emmanuel Wallerstein, a professor of political economy, spoke about dependencies. Now, dependencies are not naturally one from one continent to another. You can live in Washington, D.C. and have the White House and walk just down the road and see African Americans in poverty, even though there's a great middle class for the African American community. So this dependency, which has caused coups in the Sahel, which is causing war in the DRC, is a global phenomenon. It is not particularly African. It is a global issue because France has the largest deposits of all gold in Europe and it does not mine gold. The British government has got $500 billion worth of gold in its Bank of England. That gold is not from England. They don't mine gold. This is from the particular pernicious economic exploitation that we have. And there's no other word for it. It is exploitation. And therefore, if these people in the African Union are but agents of a comprador group that supports that political economy, then the people of Africa and its nations are absolutely right in protesting it, in demanding its change. And the Emperor Haile Selassie spoke about this in a global stage, and he put it that the Italians had come to Ethiopia to occupy it and to deny the Ethiopians of their land and their sovereignty. And the Ethiopian people fought back, and the world, some of the people in the world helped them. In that war, African Americans in New York were lining up to register as soldiers for the war in Ethiopia during that period, when the fascist Mussolini took it. And these subjects, we should not be given these subjects by the West Caribbean, because the independence movement in this country was formed by the West Indies. C.L.R. James, Aimé Césaire, all the great leaders who taught Nkrumah, Kenyatta, and all the other people in this continent. That light, that stage, we have to bring that back, because what we want is change, Ayub, I put it to you, and fundamental change.
Okay, and the Battle of Adawa, which was the culmination of that defeat of the Italians by the Ethiopians. Gordon, what do you make of the remarks by Maya Motley?
Well, key issues in Maya Motley's speech. We must come out from the post-colonial mentality and stand out. Two, we must maximize on our numbers. And when she's talking about our numbers, she's not talking about Africans' numbers living in Africa. The Africans who are not living in Africa. So Africans within and without Africa, those are African numbers that must be maximized. Then Africa is a voice of reason. And this is not the first time Africa is becoming a voice of reason, to just echo what you're saying earlier on. As far as Palestine is concerned, you remember Africa tried even to mediate when there was invasion in Ukraine. African heads of state went there to try and do some mediation. So Mia Motley is reflecting on the Bridgetown Initiative paper. The Bridgetown Initiative paper was a paper that was originally generated from her own country. Actually, she's the brain behind the Bridgetown Initiative paper. This paper had fundamental issues that it was dealing with. It was dealing with debt management. It was dealing with the poor infrastructure, financial infrastructure, the global financial infrastructure. It was dealing with everything around money and resources to countries that have been disadvantaged in one way or another. So in our speech today, I look at our speech as a reflection of the Bridgetown Initiative, which of course Africa has been championing all along, as Ashi here had mentioned, that from the beginning, they had we had President Ruto even telling it right in front of the European Union, to the Americans. We cannot have already a rigged financial system. So until such a time we actually take the Bridgetown Initiative paper, look at it, and avoid unnecessary illicit financial flows, among many other things in it, then Africa may still just be another talking party, which I hope that will not be the case moving forward.
All right, and gentlemen, as we proceed with the conversation, the pictures live on your screens for our honorable viewers is President William Ruto there. These were earlier pictures live from the plenary session of the African Union before they had ended the session, and in his company was the Prime Minister of Barbados, Maya Motley, who had given a very rapturous remarks during her, when she took to the lectern during her tenure as the speaker on the floor. There is also the Djibouti Foreign Affairs Minister and a candidate who will be battling it out with Raila Odinga, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, who has been a long-serving Foreign Affairs Minister for Djibouti. They are also sitting next to the Egyptian delegation that will be led by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. On your pictures also, Nelson Koech, Belgut MP, the chair of the Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee. Rosa Buyo also is in his company, a lawmaker from the county of Kisumu. And they are just but part of the Kenyan delegation, the lawmakers who had traveled to Addis to support the former Prime Minister or put in that much needed support, though the vote is only one, and that will be by President William Ruto, who has already expressed his intention to vote for his candidate, Raila Odinga. And this was the session that had gone out for the coffee session, as they say in Ethiopia, because of their love and affection for coffee, a country rich in history, a mosaic of many ethnic communities that make up the Ethiopian nation. Also part of the Kenyan delegation, as you can see, is Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, the Kisumu County Governor, also Ken Lusaka, Governor, the county of Bungoma, and Jared Okello, the MP representing Nyando. Also, Mishi Mboko is in the company of the lawmakers who were also in Addis, and there we had also seen or spotted the presence of the Dagoretti MP, Beatrice Elachi, and Homa Bay County Governor Gladys Wanga, just part of the delegation that had traveled to Addis to support Raila Odinga, though they wouldn't be voting. That's the responsibility of the Assembly of Heads of State, who will be picking the next chairperson and the deputy chairperson. Prof, coming to you, Maya Motley also talked about apartheid South Africa, how her country provided the refueling support for ending apartheid in South Africa, that culminated with the release of President Nelson Mandela from prison after 27 years. And that is the talk about Palestine also coming and much talked about. How then is this going to be, unfolding, given that it seems very profound remarks from the continent and someone of African descent who is pointing out very profound issues that today the world community isn't talking about. If you look at America, many times they had vetoed ceasefire before the final one between Israel and Hamas, and how Africa can be the voice of reason in this vacuum and the confusion in this gallery of crisscrossing interests internationally.
The Prime Minister's message there is what I can call the politics of solidarity. And here, international solidarity in the face of global hegemony and global domination. And of course, hegemony essentially means domination, both in terms of ideas, both in terms of knowledges, including power. The politics of solidarity, and I think she gave a historical context of how Cuba rescued South Africa. Her country was the fueling station. And of course, how Cuba exported that solidarity to help fight for the liberation of people of Africa. Today, and because she was giving context to that international solidarity, her message rings loud and clear, and she's actually telling the world that the kind of international diplomacy that you're running, including the international politics of power of brutalization of the weak and the vulnerable. Of course, with the American superintendents will not avail you. That other people are watching. Of course, we know the injustices, the vicious excesses of the state of Israel in the Gaza or in Palestine, and all these things are happening at a time when, despite the UN's resistance, the World Health Organization has spoken against these things, and nobody seems to be listening. She's actually telling Africa and Africans that the international institutional order, both in rules, norms, and standards, is so normatively weak that it will not protect you.
Okay.
You have to generate your own protection. That's why she's giving the context of Palestine, what's happening in Gaza, and all these economics, you know, the global economy that thrives on the blood, particularly the blood of Africans, you know. So I think her message is very loud and clear, and that's why I think as the heads of state go into the private room to vote, and I think part of that consensus can be that where is our positionality when it comes to these global enclaves, you know, particularly the enclave that will not work to our own benefit, that will not work to the benefit of our own people. If what can happen in Gaza can happen despite the watch of the global community with the American superintendents, even what is happening in Ukraine, you know, the kind of unilateralism or American hegemony that particularly is emerging now is what these leaders are speaking to. And that's why we want to have a strong diplomatic African Union that can not only speak with a diplomatic voice, but has got to speak with what I call the voice of resistance. Resistance essentially means alternative ideas, of course, which of course is tempered with a strong political language in much the same way that the European Union is doing it, the way the Americans are doing it, and even the way the Chinese are doing it.
Ahmed, tell me this, because earlier on in the outgoing chairperson, Musa Faki Mahamat, had labeled Africa's young population, and growing by that, a gold mine, a reserve for the continent. How will this then lift Africa to the next stage of development, to first class, or the status of uplifting the people at the end of the pyramid down there? You look at Europe now, they are leveraging on AI because of the declining population, and the white supremacists in America is largely funded by the fact that the whites would be a minority in the next half a century. I mean, how can Africa leverage on this very reserve it has at its disposal?
I think it should follow the path of Indonesia. Indonesia, in 10 years, will have a greater economy than Japan. Indonesia will be in the top 5 economies in the world in 10 years. Indonesia has shown that a political class that has a vision for its people and has some kind of resources together can overcome these substantial kind of bulwarks that we have. Why do I say Indonesia? Indonesia suffered from a great Dutch colonialism. We cannot lament about the colonial past only. We have to be optimists about our continent. And I think the most important thing that we need to grapple with in this continent, first of all, is our mindset. Because if our mindset changes about how we can change things, then we can get change. 80% of the population of Africa is under 25. Under 25. And the Gen Zs here in Kenya stood up against taxation because they couldn't see the future. They didn't have hope about the future. They saw the country was going in the wrong direction. And that configuration is across the African continent, and it is going to stand up. And the African Union, or whoever gets the African Union, has to know that it is not the presidents of these countries that they serve. It is not the governments of these countries that they serve, it's the people that they serve. And unless the people become powerful, can get jobs, can get education, can get hope, then the fires of that were lit by the great Kwame Nkrumah will have some kind of light. He said that it is Africans are not poor. Africa is rich. It is Africans who are poor. And he was alluding to this fact that the Prime Minister of Barbados has been talking about, that we all have, in the words of Amos Césaire, a seat at the rendezvous of victory for this continent.
Okay, and Gordon, I'll come to the next aspect, because there's also another pertinent matter that we need to put across here. And now this seems to be the factors before even we head and get the outcome of the elections of the vice chairperson and the deputy chairperson, because the agenda is also made up by these very critical factors that we are talking about. And is there a general renaissance across the African continent by young voices? For example, if you look at beyond the suspension, how there was tacit support for the military coups across the western belt of the continent. What does this tell us about the people now yearning for governance and proper leadership with a vision for the continent?
We must first agree that the days of diplomacy of reciprocity is long gone. We must also agree that the theory of liberalism in the world politics today and world diplomacy is long gone. What we are facing and what we are faced with is realism as a theory and as a matter of action. So in realism as it is, the people themselves have already known what they want. You realize that the day when the Burkinabe president wanted to step down, the population rose up and said, hey, Agai, wait a minute, you're not going anywhere. It is our country, we know what we want, you are already taking us towards that direction. So there is that renaissance among young Africans across the continent. It did not begin today. It's something that began way back in 2011 by Abdelaziz there in Tunisia.
Mohamed Bouazizi.
Bouazizi, yes, who decided to set himself on fire. And you saw what it did across the Arab world. It's what even went down to actually haunt the Libyan president, Muammar Gaddafi. That spirit is not dead. The African young spirit that was there with Sankara is not dead. It keeps reincarnating. And it's going to reach a point in time where the young Africans will take over the leadership in either an Kuth or Kuth way. But that is the trajectory Africa is taking. So it is also time for the leaders within African setup to realize that, wait a minute, this population is a ticking time bomb for us. Okay. Lest we stop the Mediterranean sinks that we see every day. Lest we stop the Suez Canal sinks we witness every day as people go to look for greener pastures outside, which end up not being actually greener pastures, but end up being disastrous to their own lives. So African Renaissance is not beginning today, it's a continuation. It's happening in piecemeal, but that piecemeal may end up becoming an elaborate and a continental thing sooner than later.
Yeah, and Prof, also one pertinent matter that was outlined by Musa But isn't it then an egg on the face of the leadership of the continent there in Addis, when, for example, one of the biggest peacekeeping mission in Somalia under the African Union Transition Mission, ATMIS, is funded by the European Union? I mean, how can this then happen? If you look at the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the UN has its biggest peacekeeping mission there. And therefore, what can be done? I mean, Africa certainly isn't short of resources, but how can that be mobilized better and converge to the point of direction and the critical sectors that require the African finances?
Yeah, I think the louder message there is actually a castigation on the culture of dependency. Actually, the much normalized and the routinized culture of dependency of Africa over a longer period of time. And this is actually not a unique African problem. It is actually a legacy that comes out of the very nature of global politics. By the way, there is a scholar, I think in the old days, in the 1980s, who talked about the poverty of the international system and the international system of poverty. That's Mohammed Bejawi, I think a Moroccan. The dynamics of global politics is that of subjugation of a particular people, including how ideas cascades into African leadership, African officials, African institutions. I can tell you today, Africa is self-sufficient. We can take care of our global peace. We can take care of our poverty. We can take care of our resources and development. But we have been made to believe, that's why I talk about the politics of routinization and normalization of a culture of poverty, including in our mindset, that if it comes from the West, it is libertarian, it's egalitarian, it liberates our people.
From us, it's bad.
For the avoidance of doubt, global aid is what has caused much of the politics of the culture of dependence, including the poverty in Africa. Because there is actually no aid in aid. There is much more the impoverization of our people. The immiseration of our people. In fact, some of us have really studied the global political order, and I know what I'm talking about. The politics of dependence is that while these resources come, but what they take away is far much greater than what comes.
True.
I can mention some of, and this is why Trump actually does not really know what he's doing. The aid that comes to Africa, whether through US aid, whatever it comes through.
It goes to Mugaida, where they live.
It goes, first of all, to paying those high-end diplomats who earn over millions of shillings, and that money is repatriated back. They over-exaggerate the prices of pharmaceuticals. 75% of what they finance, first of all, go back because we buy those things from them. The 25% that we top up goes back to them in US dollars. The culture and the dependence on aid, that's why, in fact, I'm so disappointed that Musa Faki can talk about such, that we need more resources. We can be self-dependent, and we can create our own African sense of dignity with our own immense resources.
Thank you. Gordon Ahmed and Professor Maxwell, we proceed because also President Joao Lourenço, the new chairperson of the African Union, talked about a three-point agenda: silencing the guns, peace and stability, also talked about resources. Also Antonio Guterres, there is the question of Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, and also the debt distress, climate change. We'll be talking more about that and the reflections of the 2-year tenure, that is since 2007, 8-year tenure of Musa Faki Mahamat, the outgoing chairperson of the African Union Commission. But first, here is a profile of Raila Odinga and the journey to the African Union Commission as its Kenya's candidate since its launch by President William Ruto on the 27th of August 2024 at State House in Nairobi. The secretariat team that was put together thereafter embarked on diplomatic shuttle campaigns across the continent, seeking the support of heads of state and governments for Raila Odinga's candidature. We'll be battling it out with Djibouti's Mahmoud Yusuf Ali and Madagascar's Richard Randria Mandrato. Here's Seth Olale with the journey to the African Union Commission of Raila Odinga, Kenya's candidate.
Kisozi, the rural cattle ranch of Uganda President Yoweri Museveni. In the photos were two of Kenya's foremost political rivals, President William Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. The meeting, it turned out, was about Raila's bid for the top AU seat.
What happened then was that at the beginning of last year, we did advise the president that there was an opportunity for the chairmanship of the African Union Commission, and that, based on what is called the rotational principle, it was the turn of the East African community, not really the East African community, but rather the East Africa region, to present a candidate for the position of chair, and the opportunity for the Northern region to present a candidate for the deputy chair of the African Union Commission.
Well, as you know, it did not just come for the skies.
Sound Candy Talk Live News. At Sound Candy Talk, we provide live UHD broadcasting for church services, talk shows and podcasts, weddings, live bands, products and services launches, webinars and trainings, Zoom meetings, conferences, seminars, exhibitions, and virtual concerts. Sound Candy Talk Live News.
Invaded the place and grabbed the place. So in the way the AU condemns invasions of other places, Morocco invaded Western Sahara, and with the support of some big powers, they seem to be fixated there. And we know that Morocco and Algeria don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. and Morocco is the aggressor, and it annexed Western Sahara, and to many of the African states, that is not acceptable. God have mercy. So there are reasons why each of them will not be participating for having gone against the principles that supposedly guide the African Union on good behavior to neighbors and within the community.
Sound Candy Talk Live News.
Development in Africa rather than invested in bonds, international bonds that benefit other countries. Right. So I'm in favor of that.
That's nice. Before, once again, I let you go. President William Ruto, the Kenyan president, has said that it is good to have an African agency that will deal with matters to do with credit rating. What's your take?
My take is that I think, there's a lot of advice that African countries need in terms of managing their credit rating. There are lots of credit. By the way, there's people don't realize that actually there's a lot of African credit rating agencies and, who do a lot of good work. But I think that, there is absolutely value in having an institution that will help African countries to manage their own credit ratings.
Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best as you seek to lead in the African Development Bank. Thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, that is one of the candidates that is seeking to be part of the African Development Bank, talking about matters to do with credit, matters to do with the leadership and also development here in Africa. And I want to engage more leaders. Maybe I could just try to see if I can get one of the leaders just to have a feel of what is happening here in Addis Ababa. I can see I have the governor for Kisumu County, that is Governor Anyang' Nyong'o, just to feel what he has to tell us about the expectations back home. Thank you very much. You're live on KTN News. Definitely, Professor, Kenyans are eagerly waiting on this big day, Saturday. What can you tell us? What are the expectations this afternoon?
I think the expectation in Kenya really is just one thing. They're expecting Raila Odinga to be elected as chairman of the AU Commission. And I think we pray God that that will happen. I think we are in high spirit as Kenyans, the candidate in high spirit. So being on the positive sides of things, we hope for the best. Yes.
Right. 10 governors, more than 50 members of parliament. If Raila Odinga wins this seat, you as the governor of Kisumu County, what are you looking forward to?
We're looking forward to his very effective role in the AU, as he has been in Kenyan politics. We're looking forward to a man who likes to build consensus so that people can work together and move forward. As you know, at the moment, we have issues in Africa that need building consensus. We have a crisis in the DRC, which is a very sensitive thing. It involves foreign powers coming into pit us against each other while they loot our resources. All these things require very clear understanding of what is happening and what we as Africans should do to advance African liberation and the African revolution. A revolution that might involve the use of our own resources for our own development. The idea that we have a world in which imperialism is re-emerging in a new way. And we must understand it and have solidarity with the other people in the world who are in equal struggle. That's why I was so happy about statements that were made today about Palestine and the statement made by the Caribbean representatives that we need to come together as people of African descent and people who are suffering under imperialism to advance our cause.
Hey, thank you very much. Governor, kuna sherehe hivi baadaye maneno namna hii sherehe ya kusherehekea ushindi?
Well, sherehe iko lakini siwezi kusema iko pande gani. Tuna watu hapa mijini ambao wanajitayarisha kukuwa na sherehe.
Utualike. Asante sana Governor. Thank you very much. That is Governor for Kisumu County.
Of course, Blue Band is amazing on toast. Duh. But did you know there's more? Blue Band can do your topping and your frying and stir frying and mixing. Blue Band for stewing, baking sauces, also grilling and toasting. Nice in matoke and ugali and tilapia. That's right. For breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. Tasty, crispy. Want a bite? Mmm. So yummy every time with omega-3 and
meeting, and definitely we'll keep the viewer updated so that at least he or she understands the ongoings here in Addis Ababa. And I want to engage more leaders because leaders are there. I want to just have a feel, of what is happening. Mheshimiwa, asante sana. You are live on KTN. Definitely, we are following on what is happening here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, on the election of the AUC chair, where we have interest as Kenya, and you as a member of parliament, you've come here in support of Raila Odinga. So far, how would you term the ongoings here in the AUC assembly?
Well, we are upbeat as Kenyans about what is yet to happen. It will be a closed-door session, which I think should also be beginning in a few minutes. And that is when the election is going to be held. It ought to have been done, like the last item. But word has it that some presidents and heads of governments are planning to leave a little earlier. So they have brought it forward, backwards, so that it can be done in good time. As Kenyans, we are very happy. If you look at what is happening even back at home, Kisumu, where I come from, is in a celebratory mood now. The ungazetted barrack of Kondele is up in arms, quite upbeat about what is going on. Nairobi CBD, we have seen people really expected. So we are, as Kenyans, quite anxious about what is going to happen, but we are very optimistic of Raila Odinga's win. Now, coming to the plenary, what has happened since morning, Africa is coming to the realization that we must unite in order to get what is rightfully ours. The theme is about injustices meted on Africans and the need for reparations to be done. And they're talking about real reparations, not just lip service that we have been treated to for way too long. So we hope that the resolutions that will come out of these deliberations will be those that will be actioned, that they will be taken to the next level, so that as Africa, we can move as one unitary society.
Right, Mheshimiwa, before I let you go, 3 candidates, and of course you've heard there were reports of a letter released by SADC on maybe encouraging the member states of SADC to elect the Madagascar candidate, Richard Randramandrato. What's your take about that? Can that change the dynamics this afternoon?
Well, the dealing with presidents is different from dealing with the common people that vote in an electoral process, such as in our case. And I want to believe that presidents have principles. They are governed by the rule of law as well, and are not going to be swayed by mere letters. Again, the authenticity of that letter still remains a mystery. So we do not know whether that letter is indeed a letter that came from SADC. But even if it did, we do know that we also have friends, and Baba has actually traversed the entire African continent, swaying leaders, presidents, and heads of governments to vote for him. So we are not going to be taken aback by letters flying around whose authenticity remains questionable. So we do know that Baba, just like any other candidate, has moved across Africa, talking to presidents who will make that decision here today.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa.
Asante.
Of course, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o has told me that there will be party after party. I need also to be invited with my colleague Brian and also Nyongesa, our camera person. Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Definitely we'll keep the viewer updated. But for now, I want to hand it back to studio. And as I hand it back to studio, just to remind you that this election is going to be having 3 rounds. And in the 3 rounds, the winner must manage to get to at least Ghana 2/3 vote. That is around 33 votes of the 49 that will be casted today. And also that definitely means if we miss to get a winner in the 3 rounds, then they're going to be moving to the 4th round, 2 top candidates. And then if still we miss to get a winner, then we move to the 5th round that will have 1 candidate. So we'll keep the viewer updated when and as it happens here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. But for now, let me hand it back to studio.
Well, there you have Daniel Kariuki telling us, well, there's anticipation for party after party back here in Kenya, especially in Kisumu. We'll be speaking to Bramwell Bire shortly in Kisumu to let us know what the expectations are in Kisumu. I hear Nairobi grounds, at least most part of it, are in anticipation for victory for Raila Odinga. We'll be crossing over back to Addis Ababa shortly, but allow me to appreciate my guest in studio who was here way earlier, Dr. Barak Muluka, who generally you would refer to as a political scientist. However, he is a PhD, he has a PhD and is a seasoned publishing editor and a strategic and political communications and leadership communications consultant. He's also a writer in politics and a regular commentator on social and public affairs on the global platform. We're so glad to have him. I would want to give the whole profile, but Daktari, we want to once again appreciate you for creating time to be here.
Thank you.
You have seen what has happened, and of course, Kariuki has engaged quite a number of leaders there. But what also happened today is we saw the new AU chairman take over, of course, President Lorenzo of Angola. And someone would ask, is this working to our advantage? Is it giving us a green light in as far as the voting pattern is going? The proceedings that happened the past 2 days thereabout, what would be your general remarks on the pattern or the exercise that's happening in Addis today?
Thank you very much, Anki Doris. First, on a light note, you know the PhD issue has become a little vexed in our country.
Yes.
so you don't flaunt it around very much, regardless. But we know about the issue of AU chair, a chairperson. It is basically something that migrates from one region to the other. And it's usually very much a predetermined matter that has been usually decided by the regional heads of state and government. And by the time they are getting to Addis, as they have done today, it is more or less a foregone conclusion.
Is it?
As recently as a few days ago, it was public knowledge that João Lorenzo was going to become the next AUC chair.
AU chair, actually.
The AU, the African Union chair.
Yes.
And that whether we talk about whether it's going to favor us or not favor us, it is neither here nor there. It depends on what specific issues we would like to canvass within the union. And within that union, that canvassing will take into account the fact that the African Union, just like all other international forums, are basically arenas of international politics, international interests, but people will reflect about those interests from the perspective of national self-interest. So it will depend on specific agendas that are on the table within the AU space.
Speaking of agendas, and I know that it is public knowledge right now what Raila Odinga presented as his agenda for the African continent. And we've also had the AU chairperson now, the new AU chairperson, speaking on a number of things, including, inclusion, financial autonomy, some of which align with Raila Odinga's manifesto. Perhaps we pick up on that, then as the voting commences, that then he would be against this particular two candidates, stand out as a candidate that would convince the heads of state this afternoon to vote him in. I'm referring to what he presented as his strong manifesto and vision for Africa.
For a start, they have their own blueprint, which was adopted in the year 2013, and that is the Agenda 2063. And so one must begin from that Agenda 2063, and it has got some very specific expectations that have been put there on, number one, making Africa's voice loud and clear within other international fora. They're talking about inclusive development that leaves nobody behind. Whether that is realizable or not is another question. They're talking especially about inclusion of women and the girl child. They're talking about education. They're talking about health issues. They're talking about infrastructural development. And when you turn to the three candidates, you will discover that they're basically saying the same thing in different idiom, but essentially the same. And therefore, one starts thinking that it may not be so much a question of what specific agenda an individual has presented, but more of regional interests, more of the interests of specific countries, and how much they have been able to align and harmonize them with other partner states.
Sound Candy Talk Live News. At Sound Candy Talk, we provide live UHD broadcast for church services, talk shows, and podcasts. Are you? Sound Candy Talk Live News.
Tunaingia vijijini, mijini na hata jijini kukuletea taarifa mchana kutwa, usiku